You're watching Analysts After Dark, an underground hideaway where insatiably curious analysts examine provocative project problems, share salacious secrets, and establish a covert network of co-conspirators. Step into the dark with your hosts, AJ Hawley and Steve Jones.
Well, hello, Steve. You're looking mighty fabulous this evening.
I thought I lost you there for a second, but I was trying to log in and I disappeared.
Yeah, we were like 1 minute out and then you just disappeared entirely. I was like, well, I guess I'm hosting this show by myself.
Hello.
How's it going?
I was fine up until 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
Yeah. Anyway, how are you?
Fantastic. How's your week been?
It's been well, the weather's been really nice. I'm enjoying the summer weather. So it's been good. It's been a little relaxing. I had our friend Amy Riddell come visit me at my house and it was really quite fun. So how about you?
Very nice. So you're on a kind of relaxing downswing a little bit, sounds like. I think I just left that myself. Well, kind of. I've been doing a lot of traveling, as you know, from some of the speaking events and things like that. And work-wise, though, it was kind of a lull for me. And then now I'm kind of in crazy frantic mode, so I'm kind of ramping back up into that. So it's been a little hectic, to be honest. And
no summer break for you.
I'm sorry?
No summer break for you.
Right. So kind of dealing with some of those stressors that you would have with how do I handle all of these different client things? How do I maintain the workload that I've got? How do I acquire new clients? Like all of those things that you deal with on a daily basis. And then also just different team dynamics. So as I'm working in those different teams, team A is completely different from team B because they are completely different industries, etc. And so you can tell the vibes are a little bit different from one to the other. So you could be really casual in one environment, but they want you to be really buttoned up in the other environment. So all of that was
one hat, then switch the hat.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Stressful. So it can be stressful. So how do you normally deal with stress when you're at work? When I know we're both self-employed a little bit there, so it's different than someone in the actual workplace, but you've worked in a ton of different environments. How do you handle that?
In the workplace itself, or how do I deal with stress?
Yes.
In the workplace, there's going to be a confession here. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So there's a lot of just smiling, comparing it. There's a lot of that. So yeah. So, and then really my, after dark stress reliever is watching reality television.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to admit, but I do. I love reality television. I don't know.
So interesting to me because I feel like, and maybe this is a guys-gal situation that's a little bit different where I know a lot of my female friends will kind of get into that where they're like, oh, I can watch somebody else's drama all day long. And for me, that's the last thing I want to watch is anybody else's drama or fake drama. Like, I don't need to have that fake. I have enough drama as it is. I want something mind-numbing. And I feel like, the difference in reality TV for the genders might be you're watching Jackass on one, which is technically reality TV, but it's just a whole bunch of people that are, doing idiotic things. And you're like, you don't have to think about it. And then on the other hand, you've got, dramatic scenarios where it's like, oh, somebody else deals with the same thing I do.
I think it's sports for women.
That's fair. Well, I think we have a phenomenal guest to talk about all those things and maybe help us sort out our own issues. We have the amazing Dr. K joining us. So let's go ahead and say hello to her. Hi.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So welcome to the show.
That's naughty.
Nope, that's the wrong one. That's the right one.
This isn't a word yet. You're already saying that she's naughty.
Yeah. We can call that a Freudian slip, right? Sorry about that. So we'll do that again. So hi, Dr. K.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. The introverted part of myself is like freaking out a little bit, but the extroverted part of myself is really excited. So thank you.
So, is that like a Dr. Jekyll, Miss Hyde situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
They come together. They're going to have to work together on this one.
Well, Dr. K is a highly respected psychologist and life coach specializing in helping professionals overcome work-related stress and burnout. With years of experience working with professionals, Dr. K understands the unique pressures and challenges faced by today's professionals. Through a combination of evidence-based therapy techniques and personalized coaching, Dr. K empowers individuals to develop effective coping mechanisms, enhance resilience, and achieve a healthier work-life balance. So whether you're struggling with overwhelming workloads, difficult colleagues, or lack of fulfillment in your career, Dr. K provides a safe and supportive space to explore your concerns and develop strategies for lasting change through individual counseling, and her holistic approach addresses the root cause of stress, which is awesome because we talk a lot about root cause in analysis, and she enables professionals to thrive both personally and professionally. So that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff that you do.
I've been doing it a long time.
How did you get into therapy, and what's the thing that you appreciate most? You said this is the route that I want to go.
I got into psychology when I was 12 years old. I used to play a lot of sports, and I found that a lot of my friends would kind of tell me their problems. And so I asked my parents, I said, this is what's happening. And they said, you should be a psychologist. So I started reading encyclopedias. For the younger people, those were big books with lots of information. So now we have online nowadays, so you don't need all of that. But
Right.
I started reading all of it, took psychology in high school and college, and just started as a peer counselor in college, and then just kind of continued on. And worked in a variety of different places. I've even worked in a prison, a women's prison and a men's prison.
That's interesting.
So I've known you for years. I didn't know that aspect of you. So you worked in both a men's and a women's prison.
Yeah, I did an internship, and we did 6 months in a women's. Well, my rotation was 6 months in a women's prison and then 6 months in the men's prison.
Okay. Wow.
Maybe,
so I'm sure
maybe
that
that's confessions time when we get to
That might be a good one. Yeah, that might be a good one.
That's some juicy stories right there. I have a quick question for you, Dr. K. So what is your favorite after dark activity?
My favorite after dark, I love fiction. I love reading about, I was going to say other people's lives. And I always say, I don't like to do much psychology stuff. The fantasy piece of other people's lives. So I love that. You can read one book where you're in Egypt and another book where it's just a cozy place in New Hampshire to, being on the open seas. So I like being able to, I'm a good visualizer. That's probably one of the reasons why I love doing hypnotherapy. That I love being able to kind of place my head in a lot of different scenarios. So nothing super exciting, but I like it.
I love
you
it.
feel like that helps you connect better with your patients?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes it's a good thing and a bad thing. I definitely helps me learn about the internal processes of people, and you definitely get through that through writing because people write what they know. So there's definitely very helpful. And the negative probably part of it is I told my husband that sometimes I never get to leave my job because psychology is everywhere. So I'm if I watch a television show, it's I've been doing this for so long, you can't help that you start to do it where you're thinking about the characters and why would they do that and would that be accurate? And I do that with my books. And so I noticed that anything is related to people, that I'll sometimes look at all those patterns, but it's still fun for me.
Well, that actually takes us to our biggest and probably the most important question of the evening. What's wrong with me?
Well, I come from a positive psychology standpoint, AJ.
Got
So,
it.
like, what's right with AJ? Sometimes our strengths are weaknesses, and our weaknesses are our strengths.
We can talk about it later. I got all sorts of dirt about what's wrong with it.
Shall I share, Dr. K? The first time that we actually interacted?
Sure.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Well, the first time that we interacted, I had just met my now wife, and it was our kind of first outing together. And she was there as a friend, but to my wife, and also a psychologist. And so then she asked a whole bunch
I was not her psychologist. I got to make sure.
That's correct. She was not her psychologist, but she was operating, after hours pro bono. And she was
As like a scout or a judge.
Assessing certain qualities about me, asking me questions that were, very in depth and very astute questions. And Carolina was sitting there just kind of watching the entire thing and loving it, because she wouldn't have asked half of those questions. And she's like, well, I got to basically go through the first month of dating somebody in like 20 minutes.
How dark and twisted is AJ?
Different show. After
Hiring
dark.
minds want to know.
Yeah. So I got to learn a whole lot about Kristin then, and I was impressed by the level of insight that you would just go from one question, and then you would ask a deeper question, and then you would ask a deeper question. And some of those I think I was able to, weave and dodge, but you got a couple of good body shots in there.
I think one of the things that I love about it is that you took it like a champ, because I didn't know you very well.
Yeah.
And I mean, Caroline and I were just becoming friends, but you took it and you were like professional and you were good, and yeah, you made fun with it, which is wonderful.
I think I need you to come on some dates with me, Dr. K, and start to weave out. Okay, so I think that would be really helpful. We'll just have you virtually, like when those movies, just like in my ear. Okay, ask him this, ask him that.
Yeah, my husband probably vouch with not easy dating, with dating me anyway, because I do come from a psychology standpoint. But it's like you might as well get it all out there in the beginning, so no one has to waste their time.
Psychology is at the root of almost everything, though, doctor. Like I find, because I'm a marketer, and I have my Bachelor of Arts in psychology as well, and it's just understanding people is at the root cause, going back to that, of everything. It's we at the end of the day, even though we're using technology, we're connecting human to human. And so, as a marketer, as a business analyst, as a any kind of role we're in, we have to deal with people to people for almost everything. So. So what you're doing, you're saving the world one person at a time.
Yeah, you guys probably both come really good at reading people, I imagine.
Well, I think there's a good sussing of people, just observing. But I feel like a lot of times in the analysis space, we end up doing a lot of that work. Not that we are, organizational psychologists or anything like that, but like we are looking at individuals to say, well, where's the broken part of this process? Is it in the handoff between departments? Is it two people and they have their castle building, or they're kind of walling off everybody because they have their own organization, they're building that out and protecting all of their own ideas, and then why is that, right? So there's a lot of that root cause that we have to do just in operations. But I think a lot of the times the problem isn't a process, it's the people part of the process that make it interactive and interesting.
Yeah, you guys are like the Sherlock Holmes of working in businesses.
In some aspects, I think that there's a lot of the fact finding. You're going in, it is a puzzle that you're trying to put together that we're figuring out. But the good news about some of the conferences that we'll go to, you are surrounded by other business analysts, and I find that they tend to have a lot of emotional intelligence. And so then when you're around a group of people, so like I'm sure that you have psychologist conferences that you go to and mental health conferences that you go to. Do you find those comforting, or is it almost like everyone's assessing everybody?
I think I don't see that people are necessarily assessing. I think one of the things I see in sometimes the psychology conferences, it's more of you get used to like giving feedback and, you know, trying to help people work through things. So you'll kind of like get some of that kind of piece of it. But I do think it's kind of changed. I think, you know, like I feel like there's definitely a difference between pre-COVID versus post-COVID. I feel like post-COVID people are much more like supportive and understanding within the field, where it used to be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more competitive, or a little bit more of like people feeling like they need to perform. So I think it's definitely gotten better in terms of that. But I don't feel like I have them like analyzing me or pulling me apart or anything like that.
So you mentioned that the first instinct is to jump in and help. Do you find that when you talk to, so you're married, so when you talk to your husband and he comes to you with things, do you try to help that issue, or do you kind of do the, oh, that really sucks, sorry?
I think it depends on the day. I mean, there's a reason why they say therapists, you know, we shouldn't treat people that we know, because it's hard to be objective. So there's definitely those times you want to like jump in and just like help and give advice. And then there's other times where I'm like, all right, if this was my client, would I necessarily like do that? Or would I be better about like listening first before just kind of going in and trying to solve it? Because I want him to feel better, you know? So I think I've gotten better about taking the like step back, but it's harder when it's somebody you care about to do that all the time.
I was just kind of going with the stereotypical trope of, you know, when like my wife, she talks to me about something, she's having a problem, she just wants me to kind of put my arm around her and be like, oh, that sucks, or, you know, that situation, it really must be terrible for you to be in that situation, etc. And like almost role reversal, I go to her with, I'm dealing with this and I'm expecting her to solve it, right? And so she's going, oh, that sucks that you're in that situation, I'm sure it's terrible. And I'm like, I don't care about that, I want you to solve my problem, you know. And then I solve her problem, she's like, I just want you to listen to my problem. And so like we kind of fall in that stereotypical norm. And I was curious if you are the opposite in that situation, where you almost come in with those solutions and say, well, you can do option A, B, and C, and if you do A, here's what happens, and B, here's what happens, etc.
I think we've gotten, yes, I think before we kind of done this, I think now we've been together for long enough that we both kind of gotten better at learning how to kind of validate each other first, and then kind of test the waters to see if the person's willing to kind of take some feedback, or ask the person if they want feedback in that.
That's so hard. I find that, first of all, I like, not always, but mostly open to when people give me feedback most of the time. But I'm when, like, if somebody comes to me and they're talking about their problems, like I want to empathize with them, and I say, oh, well, in this situation, this is how I dealt with it, or this is, and because I think we just aren't we just naturally hardwired to want to provide a solution to people, and like especially at work, you know, where we're dealing with issues where you're like, okay, well, I can compartmentalize and figure out this based on the circumstance I was in, so I can help you get from here to there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like, it's harder sometimes when it's somebody you know or somebody you're married to, because is that there are times where I'm like, well, I know you do this, but I don't know if he does that always in his work environment. So then sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I'm making this like too much about like me, or, you know, like our relationship, or, and you have to be like careful, because then it can kind of feel like you're piling on top of that person. So yeah, there's definitely some landmines sometimes, yeah, with giving feedback when you're married to a psychologist. But he knew when we got together, I was like, you know, you're gonna have to deal with it. I'm like, I like to help, and I like to ask questions.
I think that dovetails into a question I would have, is like, how do you give, like, as if you're working in a team environment and you're expecting to give feedback to people. As I said, I'm a people pleaser. So like any kind of confrontation, any kind of negative feedback that I had to give to someone, it's like, oh, it's awful. How can somebody sort of reframe that in their brain so that they can feel more comfortable with being less, that confrontation part of things, or leading teams, especially?
Well, I think that's a little bit the difference between like life coaching and therapy, so like the therapist would kind of take a look at what's the need to be a people pleaser, or the difficulty in giving honest feedback. But maybe it's something related to when somebody was younger. Maybe it's this particular client. My lights just fell. My pinglets. So I think we would kind of explore of like kind of what are the thoughts that are kind of around that kind of lead to you feeling, or to any person having that kind of reaction. I think the life coaches, and definitely in psychology or in therapists, we do a little bit of life coaching as well, is then kind of coming up with, well, what are the strategies of kind of how to do it? So I think that's where it really just depends on the individual person and what your particular struggle is in being able to give that honest feedback, or feeling uncomfortable in doing that because you're afraid they won't like you, or you'll get a negative reaction.
Yeah, it just gives me crazy anxiety, for sure. That's why I'm self-employed.
Well, so I know I'm comfortable with therapy. Leslie, I feel like you are as well. I have a couple questions. Why do people avoid going to a therapist or seeing therapy?
There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, it can definitely be, social stigma, is that I think that there are people that think that people will think that they're crazy, or I think there is that misconception of that only people that go to therapy have major mental health issues, and not realizing that people go in because they're just struggling with something. There's a lot of people that go because they're experiencing adjustment issues. They have an issue with something that they don't have family members. They maybe can be objective, or they want somebody who can give an outside point of view that doesn't know them. So I think there's people's like fears of like how they'll be perceived, or that they don't fit into that category of what therapy is, but it is for absolutely everyone. I think the other piece of it is that it can be uncomfortable. If for anybody who's done therapy, there's going to be times when you might be challenged, or you're going to have to deal with uncomfortable feelings. And some people have gotten really good at avoiding those particular feelings. And some ways is easier, but some ways it's harder because of all the baggage you carry with you, and then often the avoidance strategies that don't tend to be healthy. So I think it's the avoidance, it's the misconceptions about what therapy is, and definitely the stigma, I would say, are probably the top reasons.
So then if you find somebody that does get over those stigmas, that come to see you for the first time or come to talk to you, what do you find as some of the most common occupational issues that you treat?
So I would say probably one of the number one issues that, AJ, you have definitely some understanding on this, is imposter syndrome, of that feeling unsure of themselves, feeling like, everybody's doing better than they are, or that they're going to be judged, or they don't really know what they're doing. So I'd say that's definitely a top one. I would definitely say maybe like work stress in terms of like time management, or feeling overwhelmed, trying to manage all the responsibilities within their work and then within their life, and how to kind of manage that stress. I'd say more and more in terms of being able to set boundaries has become another one. Nowadays, because people do have access to their cell phones, of learning how to turn off work because they feel like they're carrying it with them all the time. And so I have a lot of people that come to me because they're waking up thinking about work, checking their email, and they're going in bed checking their email. And so they're never really shutting off. So then they're always in this constant state of stress, which then affects their sleep and their eating habits, and then often their self-care.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the imposter syndrome thing. That was my first, I say professional public speaking event, was talking about imposter syndrome. And it was kind of one of those meta situations where I was kind of moving into public speaking because I was scared of it and I wanted to challenge myself. And so then I was like, well, what do I even know to talk to a whole bunch of analysts about? And it ended up being imposter syndrome in business analysis. And so I think having that conversation and just being able to express, hey, I'm dealing with this, and then having people come up to me afterwards saying, I was dealing with that same thing. Thanks for saying something. It's one of those things that once the cat's out of the bag, you realize, oh, not really that big of a deal. And everybody deals with that at some point, of feeling like they don't know everything and they're comparing themselves to somebody else that's better in the field or better at that than them, or, whatever, and have no idea that that person is even struggling with their own sense of, imposter syndrome. And I just find that that's, the more you talk about it, the less impact I feel like it has.
Absolutely. I think people don't understand is that most people, and I'd say probably all, though some people wouldn't maybe cop to it, have that insecurity at some point, and even when I've had people, they're like, oh, no, that doesn't bother me. In some way it comes out in some other aspect of their business or definitely even their life. So I think everybody kind of questions themselves. And I think especially when you're in business, and especially when you own your own business, it's going to come out. And I don't think it's always a bad thing, because I think that's also what helps us grow, kind of questioning ourselves and recognizing on what we need to do better is what sometimes makes us better at our jobs and helps us continue to learn.
Yeah.
Dr. K, so the people that probably don't have imposter syndrome, the people that, that are the opposite of that would be the narcissists. And it sounds like we have a good sized population of narcissists in our mix, especially in the workplace. So how do people deal with somebody who's toxic or a narcissist in the workplace?
I think sometimes what helps, and I know this is going to be difficult, is empathy, is that even narcissists really do tend to be very insecure. And I think that's when people interact with them, they're like, oh, this person's so arrogant and they think they're so wonderful. And you don't see that insecurity, so you don't think that it's there. But people that are like truly confident and comfortable in their skin don't need to brag about themselves. They don't need to be competitive. They don't need to step over other people. Narcissists have that insecurity, and they feel like they have to control, they have to prove that they're great. And that's why they're going to tell you that they're great or show up people. And that's because of that insecurity. So I think sometimes recognizing that it's kind of a little bit of an immature way of dealing with things and that they really are insecure, I think sometimes takes away a little bit of that power, and kind of makes people seem a little bit less intimidating. I think another way is when I used to work in a substance abuse treatment program, we had a therapist, and she always worked with the people who own their own businesses. We had vice presidents and CEOs and things like that. And that was always like the people she directly worked with. And it always stood out to me. And I think this definitely works, is stroke, poke, stroke. I think is that sometimes with narcissists, because there is an insecurity, is to sometimes lower those defenses, is to start off by saying something nice and then saying something that, okay, and here's how I'd like you to improve, and then ending with something that, but I really value this about you. Because if you go in trying to demean them or give negative feedback too fast, their defenses are going to go up, and insecurity is going to be triggered, and that's why they're going to lash out. So if you go in with that kind of like compliment, some people call it a compliment sandwich. But if you kind of go in, obviously it has to be genuine, and it can't be like you're manipulating. But, usually we can find some good in most people or in most processes, I imagine, is that by going in with more of that positivity, people do tend to lower their defenses a little bit to let you in to be able to hear some of the things that they need to improve on. So I would say another way. And then, of course, there's a lot on narcissism nowadays. It's become kind of a key word. I think the other thing is just, am I answering your question? Am I going off? Okay. is just to remain neutral. I think that's kind of the other thing, is just trying to, there's a term called gray rocking, where, you don't get overly emotional. You kind of just stay neutral and very matter of fact, so that you don't end up continuing to make them more upset or trigger that kind of defensiveness.
I get nervous when people sort of gray rock me. Like, not that I'm the narcissist ever in this situation, but like, just when someone is like really unemotional and they just give nothing, I just get so stressed. Usually like AJ's face right now for that.
Well, I think the thing to remember, there are people that may be doing that too, but I do think some people, that's also just kind of how they process, because I've had that happen with people where I'm like, like, hey, like, what's going on? Because when I'm working with people, and there are some very like deep or introspective things that we're talking about, that will sometimes happen where people will kind of go blank. And it's not that they're trying to gray rock. Sometimes they're really kind of processing or thinking in their head. And it's really not about you. They're kind of thinking through like, how do I want to respond to you? But sometimes it's like, it may even be how good you are. Like sometimes it's like you almost like blow their mind. I've had that happen with people and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I say? And they're like, they're like, whoa, that's really interesting, or I hadn't thought of that. And they're just trying to process it.
I mean, I'll admit that I do have a hard time making eye contact with someone if I'm thinking about something intently. And so then if you come at me with something that is mind blowing, then I have to look away, or I'll just kind of escape, and you'll see just nothing happen. And then I'm in my own head figuring out, how does that work? Or, what's the 4 or 5 different things that are related to that, or, whatever. It's not that I'm just not present. It's that it kind of threw me for a loop. And then now I'm in my own cycle of working that out.
I had to get over it one time during like doing like public speaking, and realizing when someone is sitting there with their eyes closed. I used to, like in the past, I would have been, oh, that person is so bored. And maybe they were, but I'm also reframing it in my brain that maybe they're an auditory processor, that sometimes when people are processing information, they're not visual at all. And so they're processing auditorily, and they have to close their eyes, because I talk at a quick clip, in case you didn't know. So sometimes people need to sort of like, okay, listen to what I'm saying instead of just having all the other senses going at the same time.
I think that's a perfect example of a great reframe, is that when we're kind of doubting ourselves, it can be easy that like, oh, people are obviously bored, or they're not liking me, or I'm not doing well. But that's a great reframe to make yourself feel more confident. I mean, if everybody was doing it, then I might be concerned, but that's a great way of doing it, because you don't really know, I think that's a perfect example. Or they're tired. They're like, I'm just gonna close my eyes and kind of listen because I'm a little bit tired, and it has nothing to do with you. It's because their kid kept them up all night, the night before. And that's what's gonna help you feel more confident. So I think it's good.
Or they really were bored.
Well, we've had that happen in presentations, right? So Leslie, you've been in sessions that I've done where I'm asking questions, and I've planned for interactivity for everybody, and I want them to engage and so on. And then you ask a question, and then it's just crickets, and no one is interacting. No one's giving you anything. So I've got nothing to work with. And so then I ask more penetrating questions, and then nothing. Like, okay, is it me? What's going on here? And it just happens to be that particular audience is just not interactive. They want to be fed information. They don't really want to be involved in it. And in that space, that's exactly what they want. And so give me the things that I want. I'll write them down. I'll go take that away, and I'll apply it. Versus, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, you see someone raise their hand, and they're kind of doing like one of these numbers, and it's not you. It's just the fact that they really don't want to speak out in front of somebody else and expose, I might have done this for a year, and this is the wrong process, or I'm new to this. I don't know things. And I feel like creating that safe space is like the first thing that you have to do as a presenter, saying, hey, we're all learning here.
Absolutely. It's a great looking at it.
So you mentioned the reframe a second ago. And I like how you said it's a reframe. You can think of it this way, or you could just shift that thought process in somewhere else. What would be 3 ways that we could probably check in with ourselves to make sure that we are either reframing conversations or thoughts or ideas, or just looking inward to, how am I feeling about this? How do I process this? And do that self-assessment.
So one of the ways I would highly suggest for most people, if it's not every day, then at least pretty regularly, I would say, is journaling, because it is a great way to really kind of connect with yourself. A lot of times when people are kind of processing, sometimes it can turn into like racing thoughts or rumination. We're kind of going through the same thing over and over again, and being able to kind of write it down and kind of see it on paper, or, if you have a digital tablet or even a computer or phone, is that it can help us see it a little bit more accurately, and it can kind of get those different parts of our brain going to help us be a little bit more solution focused, as well as you can always kind of go back and see what's working for you and what's not working. And then also with journaling, if you do structural journals, they have a lot of great ones in terms of, what to be grateful for, what did I learn today, that kind of have those prompts that help you kind of check in. So whether you're doing kind of free journaling or structured journals, I think that is often a great way to kind of do it. I'd say one of the other ways I often suggest to clients is that, every time you go to the bathroom, everybody goes to the bathroom throughout the day, we all do, is that when you go to the bathroom for that minute to 2 minutes of do that check-in with yourself, focus on your breathing. How are you feeling? What's going on, within you? A lot of times people are kind of going throughout their days and sometimes in survival mode, and they're tensing up or they're stressed out or they're letting it build. So doing that check-in throughout the day is a way to kind of force us to see how are we feeling. And then if we notice that we're feeling anxious or stressed, to kind of recognize, okay, what do I want to do with this? How can I change my thinking around this so that we don't continue to stay in that kind of feeling or thinking? In terms of was check-ins? What was the question? Sorry.
Yeah, so 3 ways to basically check in with ourselves. So journaling you mentioned, and then kind of a body assessment or a feeling assessment. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think, also the digital age, a lot of people do have smartwatches or apps. I know that I have a Fitbit, every 50 minutes it tells me to get up and move. So that's kind of a perfect time to kind of do that kind of check-in. Or Apple, I think, also has something along those lines as well. Or, every 90 minutes, we find that people start to kind of lag, get tired, that, just being able to move every 90 minutes is important. So even setting a timer for that can be helpful. So if we have the digital technology, using it can be helpful.
I like that you mentioned earlier talking about the setting boundaries and people feel a little bit overwhelmed. That's one of the things that I try to do when I'm either on vacation. So if I'm on vacation, I'll tell most of my clients and people that I work with, I'm dead for the next week. You won't be able to reach me, and things won't be on fire. I promise. It's just, if something went down, it's because the entire platform went down, not because of anything that's there. But here's somebody else that could help solve that problem, etc. And so that allows me to kind of escape. But also, I think we can do that technology wise as well. So I can set quiet times in my email, and I do that. So at 10 p.m. every night, I get no new messages or emails, right? Unless I go in and manually check them. So I think setting those things up is a nice buffer at that point. So that way you're well, at whatever your tolerance for that is. So if it's at 6 p.m. every day, cut it off at 6. And then you can set up your own out of office, or this is my personal time, etc. There's a lot of different tools that you can use for that. Absolutely.
I think one other one that kind of came to mind as well that I also find helpful is to read a self-help book every day. And for people that aren't big readers, I'm not saying read an entire chapter, even just read a couple of lines, read a paragraph, because that kind of forces us to be a little bit more introspective. And I think when people are more introspective and focusing on themselves, is that they also feel more power and control. And then also it's just a great way of learning.
That is great feedback. So thank you. I think that takes us now into our next segment, which is our BA hotline. So let's go ahead and see if there's any questions that we have out there from our audience, and then we can just go ahead and pitch those to you.
Let's eavesdrop on the BA hotline and see what provocative project problems are awaiting us. Is your project in hot water? Operators are standing by. Ooh, that's hot.
All right. So the first question that we have is, how can we as analysts encourage or foster a psychologically safe work environment?
Okay. So in terms of, when I think of what you guys do, for as analysts, when you go in, are they saying in terms of for the managers or the employees, like the direct work that you're doing with people?
Yeah. So let me give you 2 scenarios, and then you can kind of answer each one of those if you like. The first that we often have to do is go in and explore how a whole department or a whole team processes work. And so we get work in, we do something with that, we analyze it, we figure out what that process looks like. So we're kind of, I don't say judging, but we're going in and we're pulling the curtains back and looking at all of the things that are there, right? So we can see all of the good and the bad to get together. And so that can feel invasive for people that are on the other opposite side of that, where like, who are you questioning the way that this process has to work this way because we've been doing it this way for 10 years and whatever. So people feel that A, there's change involved, B, that they're feeling scrutinized, and then whatever we're doing it because we're building something new, which is going to make them obsolete. So in that, there's a lot of anxiety whenever we go into a room to talk about all these different changes that we face for the individual. And then on top of that, we're going in and we have to get something out of them that they may or may not want to give us. At the same time, give them something that is like, this is going to be okay. I've got you. I've got your back. You'll be trained on this. And then so it's kind of a give and a take at the same time.
Yeah. So let me ask the expert analysts that we have here, because I imagine, so let me prompt that, is that I imagine one of the things that you guys have to do is build rapport, is that you have to, in building rapport. I mean, I know that even in psychological therapy and sales, and I imagine with what you guys do for a living, is having that rapport of that you are an expert, and then, but also that you're there to help, and having a little bit of that rapport of, or familiarity, I'm trying to think of a different word for rapport, with the people that you're directly working with is important. Like, how would you say that you build that with the people that you serve?
Yeah, so I think that has to be trust. So one is I know what I'm talking about. The other thing is I have you, it's kind of however you say that, but like I've got your back and I'm trying to do this to help. And then the other one is not coming at you. If I'm pitching ideas that are contrary to how you believe or what you think, it's a problem. Let's focus on the problem, not the person. So I think that there's a lot of that you have to be able to build that quickly, because you can lose it. Like you have to start out with that because you're starting out at zero generally, and then you have to build that quickly. So I'm kind of rambling, but the whole point that I'm trying to say is you have to start out with that trust that we have this covered, and then we are going to take care of you and kind of build that. And I think through personality, you can't just come in and start asking questions. You have to figure out who that person is, what's their motivation, and then almost suss that out from how they're presenting, right? So then now once I hear something, kind of flipping that back and say, but I understand that this is what you're saying, even if you change all the words around, etc., flip it around, reverse it, you can come in and they go, okay, this person knows that here's what I want, and they see that, and I can actually see my ideas presented in some sort of backlog or whatever repository of work that we have.
I absolutely love what you just said, because I think it really testifies that it's so important that you're there to help them. Is that you're there to learn about them, you're there to help them, you're interested, you're not coming in of like, I'm just coming in to tell you kind of what to do. And I think there are a lot of companies that make that mistake when they're making changes, where there's somebody that comes in and they want to like prove themselves, of like, oh, now I'm the vice president and I'm going to come in and I'm going to change everything. And they don't listen to the needs of the people that have been there. So like, another key point is really being able to listen is, I think, important. And then I think part of it is being true to you, is that how you come in, AJ, and you present, and how, you make people comfortable with who you are might be different than how Leslie does, because you guys are different people. I think sometimes people come into situations where they put on an act because it's like, I want you to like me, or I want to show you that I'm the expert, and they're not being true to who they are as a person. I know for, psychology, because I can speak to that really well. When I was starting off, it's like, I'm a psychologist and I'm going to use big words and, like, this is where I'm the therapist, and that doesn't work. That doesn't build rapport. And that wasn't true to who I am. I'm a little I listen and I care about people, and I can definitely, I have some expertise in my field, but at the same time, I'm a little silly and I'm down to earth, and I'm not going to talk at you, because people aren't going to like that. I have some clients that, have come in and they're looking for that, they're using all these big terms and they want me to kind of put it all together. And it's kind of like, like a movie, how you see some shows where they're like, oh, it's because of this. And you're not going to be able to do that in usually one session with a person. So it's kind of, I imagine the same thing for you. It's being true to who you are and finding your own process to some extent. But the listening, the rapport, the trust, I think those are all great things that you mentioned. And I don't know for you, Leslie, if you have anything to add to that you found has helped as well.
I was just sort of curious, and how do you deal with sort of like a workplace bully? So instead of getting like the people that come in with rapport and they're coming in and they're doing all, like AJ sounds like he's doing all the right things to create the rapport, but there's a lot of people that want to lead through power, and they're just like, you're just going to do as I tell you to do, and it's done through intimidation or so. How does someone sort of deal with somebody who leads like that?
That's a really kind of hard one. I don't know if that's something I'll admit, others that in terms of business analysis, I was asking my husband this week, I'm like, tell me a little bit more about what AJ does and like break it down for me. I've kind of all the processes because I haven't worked a lot in the corporate world. So I work a lot with clients in terms of their stresses within their business, but in terms of specific things like that, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in that by any means. I'd say if I had a client coming to me and we were talking about it, I would kind of go through and figure out what maybe they've tried before. I've had clients who've come in and they've never addressed it with that person. They never have said, like this approach doesn't work for me, or here's what does work for me. Like I'm this type of person. Sometimes it wasn't always that the person really was a bully. It was just very different communication styles. And it wasn't that the other person was really doing anything like wrong. It's just that they interpret it that way because they were a much more sensitive individual. So that's where it really is such an individual thing. Then in terms of, have they talked to the boss about it? If they talked to anybody within the company, did they just pick on them? Do they pick on everybody? Has HR been discussed? Have they talked to their immediate boss about including other people as well? Of that, we're having some difficulty in terms of communicating, can we bring in HR or bring in your boss so that we can kind of get on the same page? There are some bosses that are like that. You have to be super careful about how you approach them because if you do go in too strong, they're going to, gang up on you and they're going to make it even worse for you. But then there's some bosses that it's like, they respect it. It's like they're kind of picking on that person because they know that they'll give in, like, for example, and I think a bully, somebody comes in and says, you've got to, work late and you've got to do this. And I've had clients who've given into that. And it's like, have you ever said no, or have you ever, tried to set that boundary? And they haven't, and then they do. And then the boss is like, all right, well, yeah, it was about time, and like they just kind of got away with it. So I think it really depends on the specific situation.
In those situations, do you ever empower your patient to kind of do a little bit of analysis? Not that they're therapists themselves, but just say, what is that person's motivation? Is it that they want you to stand up for yourself? Is it that they're trying to cover a gap, and then because you are allowing that, then it's off? It's just off of their plate. They don't have to think about it anymore because you're picking up that slack. Is it that they're insecure, and then the power trip helps them feel like they're on top of the world? Like, do you ever kind of empower them with that analysis tip or tricks to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends if, their boss, if they're like, yeah, the boss is going through a divorce, right now. And it's like, okay, they may be feeling a little bit powerless in their life right now, especially if they know that there's some stuff that's going on at home. And so then it's kind of like, I'm frustrated here, so I kind of take it out on other people. And have anybody ever spoke up to that person? Is there somebody they get along with that there, what's different about that particular person? I've had clients where they're like, yeah, the boss, really gets along with this person because they're a kiss ass. But then there's been other times where they're like, they get along with this person because they do stand up for themselves. They're kind of like, okay, no, that's not okay. You're not going to talk to me that way. Like, I add value to this company. And because they stood up to themselves, the boss respected it.
Right.
So,
I've worked in places where it was almost like the movie Mean Girls, where there was a clique of people that were there, and then they were the ones that were running the environment. So like they're almost creating a toxic workplace themselves because everything went through them, and then they would go in. Like they were conniving through how the entire organization was operating, or that department was operating, and getting the opposite of that. So like they would come in, and then you would have to build up your own team of people. So it was almost like, I don't know, occupational gang wars. Two different groups of people. Yeah,
it sounds like a good new reality show.
Yeah, we're going shopping.
They used to have that, and it was, I forget the name of the show now, but it was basically someone was getting bullied at work, and then they would train for 6 weeks, and then they would box their bully, and then so then that person would go in, and then it's fine, I guess, until you lose, right? So if you're confronting your bully and then you're not training enough and then you lose, like now it's just, you have to quit and move to a different country. I think I don't think you're allowed to stay here in that job for sure. But.
Well, when you were talking, it kind of also made me also think of that sometimes you also have to just accept the situation. Sometimes there are times where it's kind of like you do have to avoid that person or switch departments. And sometimes it is leaving your job. And sometimes it's just learning how to not let that person kind of get under your skin, So sometimes it is a confrontation, or I shouldn't say confrontation, conversation that needs to happen. And then other times it's just learning how to let it go. I've had that happen for people, and it's like, you don't see this person maybe all the time, or my boss is in a whole other state, if they work remotely and they don't have that much interaction. And so it's kind of learning to not take it personally if it's coming at them.
Right. Well, if you have a question for the hotline, feel free to visit analystsafterdark.com and submit your own inquiry to the BA hotline. And then we will ask our resident experts to come in, answer your questions, and we'll share those. That takes us to our last segment of the evening, which is going to be our confession area. So we want to hear from you, Dr. K, and about confessions in your profession.
And now it's time for BA Confessions.
All right. So then now getting a screen check. Oh, there we go. So now this is where we would talk about mistakes in analysis that we have gone in, and maybe we presented something and we did the slide deck, 30 minutes before the meeting that we had to have, and it was a big transitional meeting or something like that. So I understand the privacy concerns of being a therapist and understand saying, well, here's what I did wrong, but what you could potentially share are things that you've seen in organizations that, maybe someone's come up to you and said, I see this a lot in organizations, so here's something that you may want to look at.
Can you give me an example? Does anyone else want to give? I don't know what's appropriate.
It's after dark. Everything's appropriate. It's just going out to YouTube and LinkedIn. That's all.
Yeah, does it have to be like
all the juicy details, Dr. K? I want to hear about like all the bads. No, I'm kidding. I do. But all like this guy came in and oh my God, that would be a confession when you're like, you should have this guy that I was talking to the other day.
And
okay.
Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's someone that is in your field and it's like, that person ended up running off with their therapist, and then now they live in, I don't know, Copacabana, and that's yep.
Is their name Lola? Were they a show?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you know her, okay?
I do know Lola. L-O-A-L-A.
I think there's there's kind of a joke between therapists, which I don't think would be kind of common knowledge, is that sometimes you'll get a client that has a lot of issues and a lot of stuff kind of going on, and maybe you feel a little bit outside your depth, and they'll come into a session and you're like, whoa, you need a therapist. And you're like, oh crap, that's me. They're coming to see me. I'm the one that's supposed to be helping this person. So I think, so we've definitely had those situations, and you have to kind of determine of, can I help this person? Is it outside of my depth? Is that, we are supposed to work within our specializations, and you do have to refer out. And then there's times where it's just like, okay, I'm sure you guys have gone into businesses where you're like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed here. It's a little overwhelming. And so it's kind of that same thing of like, all right, we've got a lot of stuff. We do treatment planning. You guys probably do like business planning. I don't know what the term would maybe be. But that's where then you kind of go through and figure out what is the kind of the most distressing thing or causing the most issue, the top priority for this client, and breaking it down, and I think there's a tendency when you want to help people, you want them to feel better, right away. And it may be something that is going to be with you for a while, and it is going to take time. And there could be a tendency to kind of like want to rush, I know sometimes I've done that with clients the first session of like, here's all the things we can do. And I'm like, trying to show them like, empower them and make them feel hopeful. And then there's times, when the session's over and I'm like, oh, I might have, that might have been a little bit overwhelming for them because they're overwhelmed by all these things. And, usually they do come back, thankfully. But I think there's that piece of it, is that getting overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that sometimes you have to address with somebody. I'm sorry if that wasn't juicy enough, Leslie. I'm being a little bit careful because I've got
all the dirt. But I would think that the people that are coming to see you are actually people that want to ladder themselves up, as opposed to the people that are just like, no, I'm pretty good with my victimhood. I'm pretty good with just, complaining about things and not making any change about it. So you don't get to see all of those people that, that are staying stuck.
Yeah, you definitely get people that are stuck, and that's why you're coming to you. So, it does happen, and that can be a little more difficult if they're not ready to change. I think what's probably more difficult is when people come to you, and it's more of a way of showing like, I'm okay, I'm normal. It's my husband, or it's the people around me, or they want to complain about everybody else, and they don't want to take any responsibility. So that makes it difficult because you do have to kind of, I know we were talking about earlier, of like, challenge them in a way that they can hear it and not take it defensively of like, some of it is you, and how can we work on this without them kind of shutting down, which, kind of like you said, with businesses, nobody wants to hear their baby is ugly kind of thing, so it's like, you have to go in and sometimes be careful of like, yeah, you're doing a lot of great things, not all perfect.
It's so funny that you use that exact metaphor, because the last guest on the show, he actually has a presentation called Ugly Babies. And he uses that. And we asked him a fun question of, like kind of a would you rather game. And so I asked, would you rather have his session, Ugly Babies and what to do with them, presented at a women's conference, or would you rather tell a friend of yours or person that that their baby is ugly? And he said he would rather have that session at a women's conference. And I feel like I don't know. I think I would have to look at somebody and be like, I'm the prettiest kid I've ever seen. Maybe they'll grow into that face. Then present, oh yeah, here's a whole bunch of ideas. No.
That might be a good segment of a would you rather segment for business analysts.
We did a whole game on it, and then
did you? Okay.
Yeah, the overhead of it was a lot, but
it was really designed to torture the last guest. That was AJ loves to torture bids, so
it's good, it's fun. But he's also a decent sport, and I think I was able to, as he mentioned, toe that line of exactly where the appropriateness is and then inappropriate, and yeah, so like you weave it. It's like a slalom, you don't really have to design a line. You could but yeah, anyway,
it's a great skill set to have.
Sure, it's my own coping mechanism for probably other things. Going into confessions, I'll share one. The people that I've talked to professionally, for mental health, I've always wanted to end up like hanging out with them afterwards, and I feel like that's always a struggle on my end, because it's like, oh well, now that you know me so well, and then how my mind works, etc., like I feel like we should be able to go out, have a drink, just chit chat a little bit. And that's the taboo that you just can't do and I have to fire them first. And I don't want to do that because, I enjoy them.
Yeah.
So that's the downside, I think, of, finding a good mental health professional.
Oh, I want all the juicy I want to hear all of it. I want to be here like, give me all the crazy stories about. That's what I want to hang out with mental health professionals on here. Like, what's the craziest stuff you ever heard?
Yeah, and then you'd be like, wait, this is too much. I gotta go. And then yeah, because I've seen that happen, Leslie.
Oh, when I start to go, yeah, that's only happened a couple times, but yeah.
Good stuff. All right, so then the last area. So this is our last call session. So now we are up to you, Kristin. So Dr. K, where can people find out more about you? How can people get in touch with you? Where do we go to find out more about you and your skill set?
Well, you can go to my website at www.drklifetherapy.com. Oh, wow, how cool. So there's information in terms of what I offer in terms of therapy and coaching, as well as I do have a weekly blog that I do as well. So that's, if you want to schedule an appointment, you can reach out to me through my website. You can also email me. My email is on there as well. I am a private practitioner, which means it's me. So if you reach out, I'm the one calling you back. I'm the one returning the emails. So you will get that direct line of communication.
We didn't even get into the subconscious stuff that I was like, I got to ask all of that stuff. So you're gonna have to have Dr. K back again, AJ, to go like hypnosis, like the subconscious and all that kind of stuff.
We absolutely can. So we can also just do a quick session after this, and then you just do hypnosis, and then now you'll be good for the rest of the week.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you are also on LinkedIn. So if anyone would like to follow you on there to see your newsletter and your blog, I know that I've actually seen some of your blogs and appreciate content that's in there myself. I've looked at that and like, it's a good reminder to do this. So it's actually
see, that's a check-in. That's a check-in, because
Well, thank you so much for being on our show. This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I feel like you just do the same thing that we do, but like for people, and we do it for businesses. So
absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of crossover.
He's a doctor.
Oh yeah. Much smarter and better at that. I get that, but I'm just saying, like, we're in analogous parallel positions. How about that? Just one's higher than the other.
Just keep telling yourself that, AJ.
Yeah.
But that's a really quick point of that, why therapists can be helpful for absolutely everyone, and definitely even business analysts, because people are hard. People can be stressful, and we bring our own stuff into our relationships, let alone of how we're affected by other people. And you guys are working with people, so you're going to be affected by it at times. And being able to process that through with somebody can be helpful if you don't have somebody in your life, or somebody that can give you maybe good feedback or really help you work through those things.
People are the worst.
That's going to be the best snippet. It's just going to be Leslie saying that, and then, hey, if you want my marketing, here's my marketing book. And wonderful. So thank you again, Dr. K. Leslie, thank you so much for sitting in for Steve. I know that he wanted to have this conversation himself, but he's got some vacation time that he gets to hang out with. So thank you all. This is Analysts After Dark, reminding you to stay curious and stay positive. So, good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a lovely evening.
You too.